And for them, I think the best way, it's not having to do the heavy lifting at first and having to come up with something that is completely different or unique. Just follow whatever I'm doing and like copy it almost to the 100%, maybe change a few things here and there. And then after you've done that, I'm sure you can work on something similar, either rewatch certain videos if you feel like, or just do the same thing by yourself. And in that case, you can probably come up with something original with your references, with your taste and, things that you're interested in. And in that case, I think that having done the course following me, it's going to be very, very helpful.
Our brand new instructor, Daniele Solimene, joins us for an amazing episode where we discuss his brand new course, Concept Art for Video Games, that is available now. It is packed with immense knowledge and creative possibilities. Not only do we discuss what went into making the course and what you can learn, Daniele also shares his excitement and reveals the work he did on the upcoming Dune Awakening game, and his time at Funcom to working with one pixel brush on Gonzilla's Off the Grid. So get ready to dive into the art and soul of video games, what changed Daniele's relationship with them, and much more. Let's go. Everyone, welcome back to the Learn Squared podcast, and I'm delighted to welcome our special guest. I'm brand new Learn Squared instructor, Daniele Solimene. Welcome, Daniele.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you.
Looking forward to talking with you on this episode. But I guess before we get into the juicy stuff, as always, wouldn't mind giving everyone a little introduction as to who you are and what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm a concept artist. I am Italian, first and foremost. I've been working in the industry for 5 years at this point. And I could say that my career has been existing pretty much outside of Italy so far. Like as soon as I got outside of Italy, my career started. That's what I want to say.
Interesting.
Yeah. I moved to Portugal 5 years ago to work at Funcom. At the time, it used to be a smaller Portuguese company called ZPX. It was acquired by Funcom shortly after. And then I've been working on Conan for a while. And then I've been on Dune mainly for the past 3 years. And
sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I enjoy my life in Portugal. It's an amazing country to live in. I live in Lisbon. The studio is in Lisbon. Met a lot of awesome people. Really recommend people visiting this town. It's amazing.
So is Lisbon home now, pretty much?
I would say so, yeah. I'm pretty much split between Lisbon and Milan, but yeah.
Is it a mission to like travel? I guess it's not too bad of a flight, right? To get over there and back?
No, it's 2 hours and a half. There are parts of Italy that are harder to reach than Lisbon from Milan. Okay.
And one of the cool things you've also got cooking or have cooked, and whoever's listening to this right now, it's out right now, is your brand new Learn Squared course, Concept Art for Video Games. An amazing course. We'll get to that very soon as well. But yeah, like, how did you get into the video game world, and have you only ever exclusively worked in video games?
Yeah, I would say professionally, 90% of my life professionally has been into video games. Uh-huh. I think I was pretty much interested in them since like a super young age. But of course, like many of us professionals, like I never took it seriously until I found out there's actual people working on them. I think I almost had an epiphany moment at some point when I was 17, I think. I went to a comic fair in Lucca, which is a town in Italy, in Tuscany. Yeah. And like there was a bunch of people selling Design Studio Press books back then. And I saw the Scott Robertson books. There was a bunch of books from Sparth, like all these cool guys that used to work in early 2010s. And I was just amazed. I was like, what is this stuff? Is it just, background illustrations for Magic the Gathering, which I used to play at the time? It didn't feel like quite the same thing. And then I found out that it's actually work that's somehow injected into the pipeline of producing a video game. And it became like it stayed in the back of my mind because, of course, I was still in high school at the time. I kept looking out for potential paths for university and so on. And at some point, I just realized maybe that's like directly what I want to do. I saw most people around me being pretty much more confused than me about what they wanted to do in the near future. And since I felt fortunate to have something like so cleared out at the time, and I decided just to go for it. I mean, it was still a bit like a roller coaster because there was no clear educational path. So yeah, a bit of trial and error, and eventually I got here, I guess.
Did you have like a backup route or an alternative route to go down if it wasn't as a concept artist?
I mean, I tried still to take it broadly, I would say. I first enrolled into the Milan Fine Arts Academy, which is like whoever wants to do art goes into that. I guess it's the main institutional education structure that there is. Everything else is private courses. And I enrolled into scenography, basically like backgrounds for theater and television and movies as well, in the Academy in Milan. But I soon found out that that wasn't really for me. I mean, they market it as something very modern, like ranging from old school theater, like 19th century type of thing, to modern movies. But all it was mainly theater. So unless you were really, really interested in theatrical stuff, like that wasn't really the place.
What was it about it that didn't like click for you? Was it something that obvious, or did you kind of like, was it not just sparking anything inside you, like inspiration wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a question of references. Like for a person that maybe grew up watching a lot of theater, maybe being an amateur actor when they were at high school, like they know the texts, they know the authors, the playwrights, and, you know, working in a field that allows you to inject all of that knowledge into something maybe gets you a bit more excited. My thing, like I still had some type of background, but it just was anything but theater. So in my case, yeah, it's video games are pretty much the same. Like I know a lot of different things very, very superficially, and being able to inject them into something that I like doing, even technically, it's pretty much fun.
And what kind of like, was there a moment where you kind of switched gears? Like what happened when you were doing all like that kind of like background art? Like did you purposely seek to change gears to go down the concept art path?
Yeah. I mean, I can do an example, but just to give you a previous example about how the work used to be at the university, like we were really, really into traditional art in the sense of doing architectural studies of columns, like learning all the single names of every curve and bevel there might be on a molding on top of a column, learning all the different types of columns. Like it was really, really precise in a microscopic slice of knowledge about classical Western architecture. And then once you knew all of those names and all of that theory, you were supposed to recreate it by pencil and on paper using all the traditional instruments. You know, it was really like being in another century, which it was fascinating for some time. But at the same time, I was exposed to ArtStation, to Instagram, to all the, you know, modern age artists out there, and I felt like I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Of course, like I had classmates that were amazing at that type of stuff, and now they're working at the Milan Theater, alla Scala. But yeah, I just felt like it wasn't for me, and I became a bit more interested in the technical stuff, like learning the basics of 3D, picking up Photoshop a bit more. Yeah, and then slowly I found out that there were actually affordable private courses in Europe.
And what was like, I like what you mentioned there about like having some kind of reference about a profession, or at least what goes into it, and wanting to work in there. Like that's a really good take, and that makes so much sense. So what were your references? Like in what was spinning in your head thinking, I need to work on this, or this is the kind of space that I need to, you know, like give my skills to?
I think it's just because I consider myself anomalous concept artist, I would say, just in the sense that all the people that I know that do this job more or less play a lot of games.
Yeah.
In my case, I I could say I play like 2 or 3 games a year.
Yeah.
I used to play them back more, much more back in the day. But I think what I really like about this job, it's what I guess I kind of started guessing back then, was that it's really a giant space where you can take all the random surface knowledge information you have about the world, and if you're just like a compulsive Wikipedia user, like it's all about that. Instead of just being cool conversation topics, they can actually be injected into something that you can bake using technical skill, and people respond to that. And just by doing that, even back then with like super basic skills and not many knowledge about design theory and all that, the thing that clicked for me was really just the dopamine that I got from putting together a bunch of building blocks and creating something that wasn't there before.
Love it. I can relate as well. Like, so with the game side of things, like, when did that drop off happen? Like, I don't mean drop off in a negative way, of course, but like, I can relate in the sense of like playing games less versus to a lot back in the day. When did that occur for you? Was it like when you started working as a professional, or was it something else that kind of like took your attention away from, I guess, just giving gaming time?
Yeah, I think it was like it coincided pretty precisely when I started to take the professional path seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as I found out, back in the day on Facebook, there was the Level Up group. Like they used to do a lot of content podcasts, interviewing famous professionals and so on. And like regardless of who they were always saying the same thing. Like you have to work so much to get to a point where you can even express yourself decently.
Yeah.
And then I found out about schools like FZD, where they basically run students through these like 90 hours a week of grinding just to learn how to sketch in perspective in the least amount of time possible. It was pretty hardcore back then. So it was almost a question of life and death. Like if I want to learn how to do this, I need to take it seriously, and I have to suspend the rest of my life for a bit, for some time, for some months.
How long was that? Like, did you go to completely switch off games, or did you just reduce them considerably?
Yeah, I just reduced them. I guess I just ended up playing the major titles that I was interested in. But I wasn't really going through Steam sales and, just picking stuff that looked interesting.
Yeah, like proper just indulgence. Like I'll try this, and this, and then let's just give it out. Yeah, I had a similar experience. I think it's 7-year gap where I actually like stopped playing, do what I needed to do, and then started playing again. And yeah, I do think so. Like, what was it like for you? Like, did you ever miss it, or was it like the best choice you ever made? That makes sense.
I mean, retrospectively, I think it was the best choice I've ever made.
Yeah.
But I mean, it becomes a more general question now. Like I miss the feeling that video games used to give me back when I was just playing them without knowing how they were made, and also back when I was a child. I feel like I sort of get the same feeling when I play Japanese games or like Asian games in general, like Kojima or even Miyazaki Dark Souls. Like the game's design is so foreign, and even the engine they use to create them, it's just not Unreal 5, so it just feels a bit different. But it's still not as the same level as when I was, playing Halo for the first time when I was 10 or something. I guess
that's the game you mentioned in the course. Like, was that one of your major games, or what were the ones that really impacted you growing up, or what did you really like invest a lot of time or put a lot of time into just playing those games and trying to beat them?
Yeah, I started out being. I grew up in a family where games and electronics in general weren't really a thing. Like we were kind of being kept away from them. So yeah, I always ended up playing at somebody's house, at some friend's house, or just sitting on the sidewalk playing Game Boy, and I was always the guy that watched over the shoulder. So
I know
that was my
yeah.
The first introduction was that type of thing. But then I had a friend that used to work in gaming journalism at the time, where small websites were still a thing. So like, you know, as soon as you had a website running, Microsoft PRs were inviting you to events and giving you free copies of anything just because you were there and taking notes and publishing an article for them. So that friend started inviting me in Milan to go to events, and I got a bunch of free copies of like I think it was Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, like the remaster they did in 2011.
Yeah.
So I ended up, after a few months, I ended up with a bunch of copies, but no console to play them on. So I was like 15, 16 at the time.
Yeah.
So I just saved some money and I bought like a secondhand Xbox and I started playing like that. And that was my proper introduction. But before, we used to play Halo at friends' houses, and we used to go on multiplayer, and we used to stay there hours and just hours doing anything but shooting each other. You know, at some point you just get bored and you just try to break out of the map and do stuff like that.
Yeah. And what kind of like gaming experiences do you prefer? Like, do you prefer single player ones, or do you prefer like online or other types of games?
Good question. I think I prefer single players more, just because I never really had a large group of friends that were also playing the same games that I was playing at the same time. So my experience with multiplayers, stuff like Destiny or even Fortnite, is just playing with random people that are assigned to you in the lobby, which is not the most fun thing in the world for me.
Yeah, there is something about being able to humiliate the person you've just beaten, but also trying to like have clever comebacks to the person that's just beaten you directly, as opposed to some stranger. Yeah, man, it's a similar thing. Mine's more like single player, but I don't know if I think what triggered it for me was the first game that I had the PS3. That was the one that was online gaming, was like a first major thing. And some of them were really bad, no internet connections. I used to play a lot of like football games, and they were really bad in terms of online. But one of the first ones that was on PS3, I've never had an Xbox, by the way. It was all PlayStation. Have you ever heard of the game Warhawk?
No, I haven't.
So it's like, I think it's one of the opening titles that came with the PlayStation 3, the PS3, and it was a online only game. It was like a futuristic type, I guess, like army game, like capture the flag type games or whatever, and just like whatever. But he had a land, sea, and air, so it's pretty cool. Like each one had its own weaknesses. So if you're on the ground, obviously you can get KO'd by someone in a vehicle, but then the person on the ground can like take out the aircraft and what have you. I was amazing at that game. I was incredible. So I thought I was brilliant. Then my brother, and that's when Call of Duty kind of like came out a few years afterwards, and this was pre the era of like decent headsets, so we had to like buy these like taxi driver Bluetooth earpieces that kept running out of battery every 20 minutes. And I was terrible at COD. I was terrible at it. So I hated online multiplayer games because I thought, I can't beat this. I don't like it. That's what kind of switched me to single player games. So basically, I think my reason is more so because I was bad at them. But I guess, like, have you, like, I guess from your experience, especially as a professional and as a consumer as well, do you think there's like a specific reason why certain games appeal to certain people? That makes sense.
Yeah, for sure there is. Sometimes I look at games like COD or, you know, large multiplayers games that are also AAA, and I feel like so much, it's such a waste that so much talent goes into the art department of those games. 90% of the players just run through them without even looking at the crate that some artist might have took 2 months to model.
Yeah.
And they're really, like, as much as I like them aesthetically, and they play nice as well, I see them as like dopamine rushers. Whereas you might have other games, single player, more slow paced, where you're kind of forced to take in all that's around you, like the environment, all the attention to detail, the sound design, the slow pace, and I guess that takes a different person to enjoy that.
Do you think so? Like non-artist friends that you know, do they have like a similar opinion, or do you find that there's like a difference with creatives that work in games and how they see games versus non-creatives, or do you find that it's completely specific to the person?
No, I think also people that are not involved in the industry have a pretty good and refined taste when it comes to games.
Mm.
Like I've seen people just wanting to play. They always only play stuff like Journey or Gris, which are basically just super simple walking games. You just have to go through the map and solve simple puzzles and enjoy the sunlight.
Yes.
And maybe they don't even know about art. They have never drawn a pencil, like a stickman in their life, but
Yeah.
they still enjoy it.
That basically described me. I think the last few years, or if I pick out the games that I spent a lot of time on, the ones that really have impacted me is definitely those kind of games. And this is before I even like did it as a profession versus to be in a profession. There's something about that. Like I guess the last one that I found a great experience was Death Stranding. Purely just for the fact that you can just walk through grass and climb. That was it. I don't know why. I just played that. I was like, wow, this is so cool. Like just walking through grass. What was the last game that you played that was like, wow?
Huh. I mean, maybe I'm breaking a bit the spell of the nice games with rolling hills, but I think it was the Dead Space remaster that came out last year.
Okay.
It was so well done. Like I never even played the first one when it came out, but they basically just reskinned the whole game without changing UIs or anything, just because it was so much far ahead back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a strong mood when you play it. Like it really gives you the creeps when you go through those corridors.
That's one I always admired Dead Space, and I always really wanted to play it, but it was the horror element that really put me off. Into the sense of like I'm a coward when it comes to horror stuff, and I don't like jump scares or anything. I remember back in the day. Have you ever played Tomb Raider?
Just the
originals.
No.
Okay, so the originals was like PS1 graphics. I think it's Tomb Raider 2. I don't know which level it was. It wasn't even scary, but I just didn't like it because it was mainly in the dark. And I thought, okay, yeah, this is not for me. But I know there's a genre of like those kind of games where it's like people enjoy that kind of jump scare kind of thing. I think there's an alien game. Is it Colony Marines, which is like a VR specific? That's the best experience, and it goes chaotic. Do you have a preferred genre though of games?
I guess whatever stays at the border between RPGs and shooters.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, like, I like slow puzzle games that involve you mentally as well. You know, you just have to think about stuff. But when a game is really well balanced and the controls are set up right, I think just being able to jump around and do cool stuff and shoot and being super fast and dynamic, that's just what gives me the most dopamine, honestly.
Yeah. And as a creative, like, do you look out for specific things when you play games now? Or does the game still immerse you if it's done well enough where you almost forget that you're an artist and you're just completely a player? That makes sense.
Yeah, I think I have a hard time playing games that have almost no, eye for art in general. Like some games might have like super cool gameplay and mechanics, but maybe they just have production, dev art, they call it. Just programmers art also, they call it, just placeholders. But some people enjoy that a lot. I think I can't really force me to play those. So there needs to be at least a certain level of artistry, visual artistry involved.
And it's kind of like sticking to the game kind of topic or being a gamer. And it's evident in the course as well. We'll get to that shortly soon. But like, what's it like now for you? Like, basically, I guess, is it correct in assuming that you creating 4 games and that whole like journey of like just problem solving and getting a brief and resolving it, do you treat that like a game? That makes sense. Like you kind of like treat it like as something to solve and like achieve the top score or whatever, and to get lost in it. Do you have that experience, or is it almost detached from the gaming experience?
Yeah, I think I do treat it like a game. Also, there's something funny. I think it was either Steam or some NVIDIA dashboard back in the day, like just a few years ago. For some reason, the software was counting Blender as I was considering Blender as a game, so it was giving me hours. Like, you spent X hours
Yes,
in
yeah,
the
yeah,
last
yeah.
few weeks playing Blender, and I was like, man, this game, you know, I don't know how many thousand hours. I've never played a game that
Yeah.
much. So I do think of it as a game. And when I'm, working late at night, I'm just thinking like I'm really grinding this. And yeah, there's levels of difficulty as well. There's stuff that metaphorically, there's also farming. There's raids, if you want to
Yeah,
call them like that,
yeah.
depending on the design challenge that you want to embark on.
And does it like what like why do you think that's how you treat, I guess, the craft of what you do in that particular way?
Mm, uh, I mean, some people define being professional as, doing stuff that you don't really want to do and do it at the top quality anyway. In my case, I think I was never really good at that. I always need to, rotate around whatever I'm doing until I get to the right angle where I can have fun doing it.
Mm.
So even if it's a task that I think it's boring and long, I try my best to do it in a way that I would have fun doing it. So it becomes a game afterwards by consequence.
It's a bit of a loaded question because after watching your course, which is incredible, and I'm sure people that are taking it right now and will be taking it will agree with me as well. You can see you've done a lot of work, put a lot of work into it, put a lot of yourself into it. But just like seeing it, I guess like from different levels, like A as like someone trying to learn, B as a professional, C as like just seeing, I guess like from my learn square duties, how the course is structured and what you've done kind of thing. There's one thing evident throughout the whole thing, and it is like someone, the instructor, as in this case yourself, like someone playing a game, trying to beat that particular boss or get past this particular puzzle to reach the next stage. Maybe going back to get the collectibles that maybe were missed first and foremost. And just like in that level, like it was cool just to like almost watch it in that level. So yeah, I just wanted to confirm whether like that was something that I just like projected onto there, or that's something that you do. So that's interesting. And do you think that adds an extra level to you as a creative to the work that you do?
I mean, I think you can always tell if the artist that did whatever image or design had fun while doing it. Like, you can see if they're just reiterating and doing, comfort zone type of stuff, or if they really, it might sound a bit cheesy, but poured their soul into it. Like, they really
Yeah.
went deep into what they know and what they even know subconsciously. They just dug deep and they try to find original ways to display whatever idea they have in mind. And I guess, yeah, in that sense, when I can really have fun doing something, when I have fun even in the research phase, when I want to really go and find out wild stuff about, helicopter rotors that I never was into, I think I can produce better work when I do that.
I also like how you explain, obviously here as well, but also in the course, where I've kind of like felt this too, but I've never been able to articulate it properly. But the way you explained it was perfect. Where like I'm definitely paraphrasing. I'm sure you said it in a better way than I'm explaining now. But essentially, the way you use it, and it's a job where you can basically pretend, so to speak, in a creative way, to do many jobs in one job, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
you become an archaeologist, you become a physicist, you become wherever, and then you can put it down on paper. And there's a definite, like, you can see the enthusiasm and the excitement, like when you like picking through something and seeing, okay, like, I guess when you're scrolling through something and you see looking for inspiration, and then when you kind of you almost can hear, even though it's that physical sound, like when the inspiration clicks, and then you can kind of go in different directions. But I know, like, for some people, getting the idea on the page or getting that spark, for some it's like almost automatic. It's like an automated process. For others, it's something that you have to grind through. What was your process on that? Because it seems like it was like something that's organic to you, but or is it something that you've had to work on over the years?
I mean, it might sound cheesy again, but I think it's as simple as trying to be curious about anything and not have preconceived notions about stuff. You know, if you as a person always thought, I'm not interested in cars. I know what they are functional, they need to move you from point A to point B. I'm not interested in them.
Yeah.
That's like, even if you see a sick ass suspension on Pinterest, you will just think, okay, that's a suspension.
Yeah.
But I guess if you allow yourself to be surprised by stuff you don't know and start to see it, I guess even graphically, as in an abstract way, very, very abstract way. You know, that's a, you know, engineering marvel, how suspensions work in cars or in airplanes. But if you just see it as a visual composition, like there is very complex shapes going on. There's like a collection of shapes and materials that react to light, and they're arranged in such a way that work perfectly for the task that they're designed for. And then, yeah, they're also a suspension, but it looks good just because it's functional, and it's been like, so many people have worked on that thing for so much time. So if you see stuff from the far end instead of from the point of view that you're used to look them at, maybe that's how you can be more inspired.
And when it comes to like research itself, you can get lost in it, but you gotta, like you just explained, you gotta decode it, or at least have a formula where you can turn something that's maybe abstract into something that you can use. When did you realize that you could do that? That makes sense. Like, did you have something that you nurtured over a long time, or was it something that just happened? And I guess like a better question to ask is, when did you understand that good research, and so that's something you explained in the course as well, how to do it, good research is useful, and learning how to transform that information that you've gathered into something useful is useful as well. When did that click for you?
I would say very, very recently. Like, honestly, that's one of the hardest things in this job, to be honest. Because the first thing that they tell you after you're done learning the fundamentals, of course, like, you try to design your first thing, and they say, just, you know, look at references. Try to not if, you know, you have to design an aircraft or even a box, the simplest thing ever, a crate. Don't just invent it. Like, reference crates that exist. If you're trying to do something realistic and military looking, just go look for existing ones and try to base yours on those. But it's really difficult to not copy them at that point, because they tell you reference them, but what does it mean? How can you pick them apart and, you know, digest them and come up with something completely new?
Yes.
And that's almost like cooking, you know, they probably even a bit harder because you have to produce your own ingredients.
And
so, yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just closing on the thought. I have nothing more to say.
And like, what was it like professionally? So when you first started off, what was the most surprising thing for you? Because obviously, like, there's a difference between like when you train and then when you have been asked to do it, and in the gig level or like on a job level. What was the first thing that stood out to you that was like, whoa, I didn't expect that?
I mean, probably from a pragmatic point of view, just how much a concept artist is involved in the rest of the pipeline. Yeah. Like, from the outside, it just looks, there's a bunch of people that create cool images and everyone else tries to turn them into reality, into the game, I mean. But no, I mean, a concept artist is basically like a support member. Like, they're always there trying to perfect whatever is being done. Either if it's like the start of the pipeline, or if it just means overpainting an asset that should be final, but for some reason it's not there yet. There's always a concept artist involved in trying to push the final look of things. And I mean, that was really surprising, because I thought, you know, it's almost not being involved with the rest of the game, but really there's always like a pinch of salt everywhere. And
prior to that, like, what was your perception of what your job would be like at that point in time? Like, before you started working, like, what did you think you'd be doing as a concept artist, or the impact that you'd have?
yeah, just that, give really cool references, trying to
Yeah.
define like the visual look of a game and maybe also inspire people. Basically treating it as visual programming instead of being a very long, you know, text made of code and lines. You basically provide this one image that is, it's a nugget of information. Like you have shapes, but you also have mood, and you could have VFX, you have scale, like you have a lot of things that involve different professionals along the way. And that's already enough. And I think it was a pretty accurate way of looking at it back in the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, game dev is complicated, so they don't need you to do that only. Like you need to keep going back and forth and help with sort of the same thing, but at different stages.
So in the course, one cool thing as well is you do it in 3 different levels. And like a game, there's different difficulty levels, and you've got beginner, intermediate, and then pro. Why did you structure the course in that way?
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time before even structuring the course thinking about who could this be for, because of course Learn Squared has a collection of like amazing professionals doing teaching the coolest stuff, and I was trying to think, where can I fit in this mosaic of different skills. And I think what I kind of went back to what I wished was there when I was still studying, when I was still like an early to intermediate student, which is like just a guy that works in the industry that honestly goes through like all the basic stuff and goes like very slowly through the creation of an asset and doesn't wing it in like 30 seconds. Like, this is how you draw an all. Do 2 circles and then do the rest of the all. Yeah. Like I think designing is really, really difficult, and I still struggle a lot. It never becomes easier. And having like being able to go through it very slowly and talk about every centimeter of the path from 0 to the destination is very valuable. And breaking it down into 3 difficulty levels is sort of a way to reach even more people, because I might just say, this is for intermediate students, and like how can someone define himself as an intermediate? Like breaking it down into 3 more levels kind of allows you to take it on as a simple beginner that maybe only knows how to use Blender and has a bit of fundamentals going on, and even as a like higher end intermediate that maybe even has a first job at the studio as a junior, but might not have his workflow perfected at 100%. And this is just a way to get through what are the latest add-ons and techniques in Blender. I mean, they won't need visual design basics because, of course, they're supposed to know them and they know them, but there's still something to get from the course.
Again, I know we touched upon the course, but we'll get into the juicy stuff of the course very, very soon, because it's interesting. It's like it's a focus course, but there's a lot to unpack in the course, and for obvious reasons, very well explained, very well delivered. What was it like? What was your workflow like when you first got into games versus to what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, I started working as a junior. I mean, right before Blender came about and became like an industry standard when it comes to concept art. In my studio at Funcom, it even became standard for 3D artists, which is unusual, I think. But right now I think every concept artist is virtually using Blender.
Yeah.
Unless they're super into ZBrush or plasticity or other very specific ways of designing. So yeah, I joined when it was still kind of 50-50 between 3D and overpainting. And I think that was also a bit of a blessing, because it kind of forced me to really grind my fundamentals and learn how to sketch and how to draw in perspective and how to paint. I spent a really long time of my life as a student and even as an early professional just painting stuff.
Right.
And I had a completely different set of art heroes and references. And then gradually it turned into 100% 3D.
And it's like I believe in the course itself, you do you can take different routes if you want. Like you can stick it to like limited 3D. You can do full 3D to get VR involved as well. You definitely showcase a wide variety of different ways. How do you manage to keep that information in your head in a useful way? Because you can have like I guess too much baggage, so to speak, and some of it is like I believe we've all got like a bunch of stationery and pens and pencils, and we probably never touched them or ever used them, but we keep them just in case.
Hmm.
And it can be the same with skills, but in the course, it's specifically used, clearly used, and you can see why it's been used. So, how do you maintain that those different workflows that you have are relevant?
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, one way of not getting confused, I think, is just trying to spend a bit of time only working with one single workflow. Because if you want to try VR and it becomes a side thing for a few weeks and then you drop it, you just have learned the surface level of it.
Yeah,
If you really if you think VR is going to be valuable to the way you work, because I don't know, maybe you think Blender viewport is too abstract. I really want to design with my hands. What I did at the time, and what kind of allowed me to speed run the learning process of VR is just saying, from now on, for a few months, I'm just going to work in VR. I'm going to do everything. Like I'm even going to wake up and do my breakfast with VR if I can, um, and then after a point, you kind of see the downsides. Maybe this particular thing is really difficult to do in VR. Like Blender is much more precise when it comes to moving objects to a precise point in space and maybe lighting them. So then you drop it, then you go back to your usual workflow, and what you're left with, it's basically like you're letting water boil and there's a bit of salt at the bottom of the pan. You're left with that substrate, which is what VR is really useful for in your workflow, which might depend, like it might be different for each one of us.
yeah. And
But yeah.
so, and like, what was do you know? I guess so. With each one, like, do you kind of like do it in blocks then? So like, this is more so stuff that you've tried and tested, you've battled through it, figured out what works, what doesn't, and then you kind of just kept it.
Yeah, but it had again, it had its relevance at the time. Like for a brief amount of time, relatively brief, it might have been some months in some case, it became the main way I worked, like that how I used to work mainly. Like I used VR mainly. I used 50% 3D and 50% painting. But at the same time, I think it's important to mention that they don't become obsolete after you get past them.
Yeah.
Like they still become, they're very useful for very specific things. Like right now I'm working on a game that is very realistic and grounded, and the workflow that I have right now, which is 100% 3D, it's very functional to this type of design. But if I had to work on something a bit more stylized, it would be very difficult to achieve that same look just by using Blender. I would actually have to work more. I would have to lift more weights, so to speak. So I could go back to a previous workflow and maybe adapt it to modern days tools, but still go back to the right amount of percentages between which softwares I use.
So a lot of beginners that listen to the podcast and also join in Squared as well. Obviously, we've got a lot of seasoned professionals and everyone in between. What would you say to people who are still trying to figure out the workflow, still trying to figure out just how to, like, I guess, get their foot into the door of just trying to find themselves, develop themselves, and get a workflow? And especially, like, in the course, which can show in a clear way, like how to use multiple different things. But just taking a step away from that, what would you say to people who may be apprehensive about trying different things just to see if it works for them? How would you recommend that they approach that rabbit hole of like discovering new things in a way that's kind of like productive? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of how you think using that particular tool would make you feel. Like again, like I mentioned before, VR is very it really involves your body. Like you need to move to design stuff.
Yeah.
And I know, like I have friends, even my girlfriend, I think she's like that. They really struggle to be able to freely design within a viewport, like with buttons and sliders and just a mouse. And like VR is much more direct. And that's one part of it. The other part is if you like how end results look using a particular tool. When I was first interested in VR, I went out on ArtStation or on Instagram or other platforms, and I just went precisely looking for 100% Gravity Sketch or Adobe Medium. I think it's called in a different way right now. I can't remember.
Yeah.
How do those designs look when they're finished? And I really liked the graphic style. Like the Adobe Medium really looked like an unrefined version of ZBrush, like very, very voxely. And I liked, I just really liked the quality of it. And Gravity Sketch, like I really liked how people are able to do finished looking stuff just by pulling surfaces and simple volumes together, which I don't in the course. I just use it as a block out tool. Mm-hmm. But some people are just somehow able to create finalized designs using those. Yeah. And like if you think that look kind of represents what your taste is, I think just go for it.
Mm. One cool thing I've always enjoyed about VR is it blends a few different things, in my opinion. One of them, obviously, like you said, like a non-viewport type experience, like using both hands, you're looking in 3D space. It unlocks a different part of your creative process, or like at least if you're working with clay in front of you, like you can look around the object as opposed to on a flat 2D plane. Also, it's fun. Like it's very like it's like a game. It looks like a game. It's built like a game. The graphics are like a game, so it's got that gaming angle to it as well. Do you find that because you clearly have like a lot of knowledge of different type of workflows and you've definitely invested the time into that. Have you found yourself, or do you think that like using different types of workflows or processes taps into your, I guess, creative psychology a different way? And maybe you can like achieve different results or specific results that you can't get in a different way? And if so, do you use that almost in a targeted way?
Yeah. Yeah, I would just call it a success rate. You know, since I started, it's always been like a research. Like I was searching for the best way I could express myself. Like how I can simply translate what I have in my mind, my ideas bouncing together and creating something, and how can I get it out of my body onto a piece of paper or just like a screen. And like it's been very slow, and I've been adding things, I've been removing them, but I'm getting closer. It kind of forces you to sacrifice certain styles, just because, if you get really deep into a type of modeling style, maybe you're not, you won't be the best at doing stylized 2D work anymore.
Yeah.
But I think the way I work right now, it's very specific to how my brain works as an end result. And I feel some people, like I've spent some time really frustrated trying to think, why can't I just be so good at ZBrush, for instance? Why can't I just be good at Fusion 360 or plasticity? Or why can't I just do everything by sketching in 2D? Like in some cases, it's just an amount of practice that I lacked. Mm-hmm. Like some people just, to become like Scott Robertson, you really have to be super talented and also work 25 years on it, even more. Probably his career is longer than that. But people, sometimes we don't have the time, we don't have the patience, and we're lucky to live in an age where there's tools that can kind of speed run you to a point where you can really express yourself without spending so much time perfecting one single craft.
And with your workflow, because you do it in a way, from what I've seen in the course, it doesn't seem like it's technically taxing for you. Like you just keep it in that pocket of like ensuring that you can create, be expressive, or solve problems. Is that something that's just occurred naturally, or is that something that you've worked to develop?
You mean like kit bash techniques and stuff like that? Or...
Just like the way you utilize tools and workflows, because with each one that you use, whether it's VR, whether it's just sketching or kit bashing or refining modeling, even the material shading, like every single element of it, you can definitely get like technical, rigorous, and all that kind of stuff. Yet you seem to not get in that pocket, and it's always about just expression. That's how I took it as well. And is that just something that you've worked on in particular, or is that just a consequence of how you work?
No, I definitely had to work on it because it's super, like, especially if you design in Blender and if you're new to Blender or even if you're experienced, it's so easy to just get lost into technicalities. Like maybe you came up with a cool environment or a cool design, and maybe you could be done in 7 hours, but then you spend extra 4 hours just tweaking shaders and thinking, oh, maybe there's this new add-on that allows me to do procedural edgeware. Like, it's pointless. Maybe for some very specific things it can be useful, but in the overall scheme of things, you're not doing that. No one is reviewing the quality of your nodes.
Yeah.
Or no one's thinking, oh, that procedural shader looks real. Like, just use a picture if you can, or paint it. And I think it comes back to me wanting to have immediacy when I work. Like if I could work at a full screen viewport and just have hidden buttons on the side or underneath my desk, I would keep them there.
Yeah.
And I'm just gradually getting there, and I'm always thinking of the final result, of the bigger picture. Like if I have to go full screen on the nodes, it's almost like I go underwater and I have to hold my breath. Like I just have to go back, and I don't have to spend time there.
That's a great way to explain nodes. Yes, another thing that I never knew how to articulate. Thank you. I'm going to steal that one as well. It definitely does feel like that. Now, with like the games, like what kind of games, types of games, or like levels of, because obviously the main focus of the course is to learn how to create concept art for video games. What variety or range of games have you worked on?
Yeah, I think I have gone full circle when it goes to visual genre, because I've been on Conan, which is a stylized fantasy game, and now I'm with One Pixel Brush working on hyper realistic sci-fi games. So I guess that covers the spectrum. But yeah, in terms of types of games, I think mainly survival RPGs, and right now this other one is a sci-fi shooter.
Mm-hmm. What is it like shifting from, I guess, like different visual styles, like I guess from stylized to hyper realistic? Did you notice a difference? There's obviously a clear difference in terms of how it looks, but in terms of approach and workflow, is there anything noticeable?
No, I would say like design thinking remains the same.
Yeah.
Workflow can be adjusted. Maybe the way I treat shapes and I treat textures changes, but it never radically changes the way I work. It's a bit of a trade-off, I think. Like when you work on stylized, doesn't matter fantasy or sci-fi, just if it's a bit stylized reality, you really have to, I would argue it's more difficult, because you can't just put unfiltered reality projected onto your design. Like you really have to analyze what's going on and being able to pick what you need to take out in terms of visual noise, in terms of amount of shapes or thickness of certain elements. It needs a lot more of control over what you're doing. On the other hand, when you work on realistic stuff, you can just use a piece of an engine as a kit bash element, but of course you need to kind of know how it works. So there's a bit more thinking in another department.
Do you have a preferred one, or it doesn't matter as long as it takes the creative juices? That's all you're after.
I think historically I've spent more time thinking about slightly stylized games, also because Dune Awakening is slightly stylized.
Yeah.
So my brain is kind of wired in that way. Even when I do full realism, I'm always thinking about how to get a dynamic silhouette, and then I can dress it up with greebles and breaking up the silhouette and making it look real, just because of the amount of visual noise that there is. but I'm like, as a first step, I always think about it as a super stylized object.
And of the titles, because you got some definitely awesome unreleased stuff that isn't out yet, so we won't get you in trouble and get you to talk about that. And obviously stuff that you had released as well. But what you can talk about, of the titles that you had released, what is the biggest takeaway, or I guess favorite aspect of that project, whether creatively or otherwise, that you have for each one?
Yeah, I mean, for Conan Exiles, for sure, I have a great depth with Conan Exiles, just because the devs at the time and everyone working on it, they just showed me the ropes. You know, I had to make all the theory, all the, you know, student knowledge I had, and make it meet with the reality of what it takes to work on a game. And sometimes, you know, you might over prioritize stuff just because some people are always posting certain types of sketches or certain types of renders, and you might end up learning that that's just the final 1%. And, you know, it's just like dealing with reality how it is, and filtering out all the stuff that is mainly just smoke and mirrors about workflow and what it means to work in such a field. And all the different requirements. Sometimes you don't even think 3D artists need certain type of information, but you really learn that you have to be extra clear about stuff, about even how edges work, because someone afterwards is really going in with ZBrush and chipping away the edges of a, you know, concrete rock slab that you put at the bottom of an altar, you know. And if you don't do that in the concept, the 3D artist is it's just not his job to finish your concept. They're just gonna do what you provide them. So yeah, Conan was really useful from that point of view, just pragmatically, I think. Dune, a bit of the same, just because I've been on it for a long time. But it was really like a step up in the challenge when it comes to design, because we had the movie as a benchmark, but also we were standing on the shoulder of giants, because, you know, we had all the design work that was done by those awesome designers that worked on the movies, on both. But we also wanted to slightly do our own thing, also because Funcom is known for this slightly stylized visual style and so on.
Yeah.
And the difficult thing was coming up procedurally with what hasn't been shown in the movie. You know, there are villages, there are vehicles, there are, you know, just characters that are never shown in the movie. The movie is very minimalistic also when it comes to world building.
Yes.
Like, you know, stuff is there, but it's never shown.
Yes.
So designing in that context is really, really hard, because you have to come up with everything, like literally everything. I talk about an example in the course. I just want to repeat it now. Like, we had a conversation for one afternoon just thinking about how does trash look like in Dune? Like, what are they processing? You know, trash is something that used to be new, and now it's not new anymore.
Yeah.
They just throw it out the window and it's piled up. How do we create trash for bandits? And, you know, when you have to think on a microscopic level to that degree, even, like, you know, when you do boxes, when you do vehicles, everything becomes a challenge.
Yeah. And
so,
when you,
yeah.
sorry, like, just specifically on Dune, when you, what's it like from your experience working on something that many people are aware of, maybe coming from, like, most likely the movies of what they visually perceive? What kind of challenge does that provide?
For sure, like, you don't want to let people down, because, you know, they know how the movie looks like, and they're gonna expect the game to look as well as the movie. And again, like, having those movie concepts as reference really, really pushed me and everyone in the art department, to be fair, to get to that benchmark, to get to that level. Like, I'm sure if we had to work on some, you know, generic new IP that no one has heard of, we would have been much more likely to stay where we were in terms of skill.
Mm.
You know, we're not really sure where we're going, but it was almost like having dozens of ghost art directors that were pointing you the way.
Yeah.
Like, this is how you do an ornithopter. This is how you do landing gear.
Yeah. And
So
what kind of
I'm really
like,
glad.
no, sorry, yeah, and what kind of like, did you find that it unlocked something different in you? Or did it surprise you in any particular way about yourself? Or did it almost reinforce what you already had understood about yourself and your workflow and how to work? That makes sense.
Hmm. Um, that's a difficult question.
Nah, fair enough.
I think, yeah, it was just a really, really good playground, like a design gym. I'm really grateful for that because, you know, I spend a lot of time doing a ton of different tasks, different subjects, you know, from environments to vehicles to tarps to tiny, tiny objects to massive structures. And at the same time, I was updating my workflow. Like I was evolving into what
Okay.
I'm doing right now with Blender. And more, like gradually I was chipping away from the painting style that I used to work more with back in the day. And, you know, cycling through these tasks and these topics. And, you know, after the circle is finished, like you go back to the first task again. Like I get to do structures in canyons once again. Let's do it differently once again.
Yes.
And I think if you work freelance, if you start out as a student and you get your first job and it's freelance, and you say, you know, I'm not willing to move to a town or a country where there's studios. I'm just gonna go freelance. Like for sure, you're gonna work with amazing professionals that are going to demand you fast deliveries and a certain benchmark in quality.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the studio environment is a bit more slow paced when it comes to this. And just by osmosis, like you can learn so much more from people around you. And yeah, maybe it takes a bit more time. You can't really radically change your portfolio in a matter of months, but over time, it's like slower, steadier learning. And I guess at the end of the day, it's better, at least for me, for the way my brain works.
And again, not getting yourself in trouble or anything. What's it like working? It's a new IP, right? Like off the grid, it's a completely
Yeah.
new. So it's like not an established world that people recognize or understand.
Mm-hmm.
You got Neil Blomkamp involved as well, who is a bit of an icon, is an understatement. What's it like working in that, like almost like shifting gears and delivering in that kind of way?
Yeah. I mean, I'm super lucky and I'm grateful just because I wouldn't be able to work on this project if it wasn't for One Pixel Brush.
Mm-hmm.
Like they worked on such good games in the past, and I guess the final nudge to my workflow, like the reason why I work like this nowadays, at this point in time, is because I had to adapt my workflow to work for them. Because
Yes.
otherwise, I would have gone indefinitely doing almost like 70% 3D and 30% painting, just because the designs were looking good and that was the style that we were going for. Working for them requires you to be a bit more fast-paced when it comes to deliveries, and also everything has to look very realistic and sharp, even just after a day of work. So you really have to work differently. And yeah, I've been working mainly on off the grid, and it's been challenging for sure, but at the same time, it's almost been a fresh of breath air, because suddenly I don't have to design pencils and trash anymore from the ground up. You know, it's set in the near future,
Yes.
so I can just go back on textures.com or ArtStation Marketplace and buy, you know, Kitbash assets and you know, design more stuff with less effort.
And what's it like, I guess, like stepping away from the canvas, so to speak? What would you say like students need, or professionals trying to break into the industry need, as a concept artist when working on games, whether it's in studio or for clients as a freelancer? What kind of skills have you picked up that you've recognized that, or were these traits as well that you think, okay, these are absolutely a must, or at least if you don't have them, try and gain them?
Yeah. Just as an anecdote, I used to work. I used to have side jobs back when I was just working at Funcom for this friend of mine that is also a very good designer. His name is Oscar Cafaro, Like he worked on Overwatch, he worked on a variety of different projects. And like I used to work as an assistant for him. Like we were kind of designing stuff together, helping him out on several projects. And, you know, at the time I wasn't really the fastest. I still am not, but, you know, I'm not comparable to the professional that I am today, because it was like 2.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But still, like he enjoyed working with me because he said, you know, you're easy to work with. Just because I don't reply too much when it comes to feedback, I try to really think about what he's trying to tell me. I don't want to just come up with a question just because I don't want to think about it. And I think that's more of a personal trait of mine.
Right.
Just because I just don't want to bother people. So I really, if I have a question, I must have really thought it through before asking you. And I think that really is valuable even when it comes to both studio and freelance work.
Mm-hmm.
It just, which from the other point of view might be a bit more depersonalizing, because if you achieve doing that 100%, it basically means that you're almost a concept art chatbot for a client that doesn't know you personally. You know, send you an email, this is what you have to do. You hit it on the first try, and that's basically it. No questions asked, and you're just amazing. But it's, I mean, I guess you can boil it down to soft skills.
Mm.
Like you really have to be able to talk in a civil way with people to be good at this job. There's no rock stars.
Mm. You can like tell like, from speaking with yourself, and in a way, like you can just tell with your approach in the course how you communicate things as well. Like there's definitely humility to the way you tackle things and the way you deliver things, especially the way you discuss and explain your process information. It's incredible. Like, so congratulations on that, because you get it almost first pass. You can tell, like, and you've explained it as well why. Like, you can tell that, okay, you've definitely thought about what this is. You understand what this is before you deliver it, almost like to us, like explaining it. So what was it like? Because it's a little bit different from working on games. What's it like teaching a course about making art for games? What was that journey like?
It was really difficult. Like I've never recorded myself doing anything, so even just getting the whole the tools to work and, you know, record myself in the proper way was kind of difficult. And then of course English is not my mother tongue, so even if I had to do simple videos explaining things, I always felt more sure if I first wrote a script of whatever I was going to say, and then I just looked at it with one eye while I was speaking. Yeah, and that's maybe why I feel like it feels like I'm reading while I speak in the course. That's why because I am reading. Okay. But yeah, just the process of going through the stuff that you know and you never even thought about putting into words, and you know, putting it down and breaking it apart and making it understandable for people that don't live in your head. That's really just like almost it's an exercise on its own. Like you end up learning yourself afterwards too. Like you relearn stuff that you already knew, and maybe you can use it more consciously while you work as well.
So the course, Concept Art for Video Games, it's available now. Everybody who's listening, hit the links if you haven't got the course already. If you're hearing it when it's out, there should be a nice juicy discount available as well. What would you say, and there's a lot covered in the course, different levels can take it, whether you're a beginner or an experienced person. So you definitely gain something. However, what would you say people need to prepare for or bring, whether physically or mentally, to the course before they begin?
Yeah, first things first, I would say that VR is not necessary. It's just optional. Yeah. You can easily get through the whole course just with a laptop and Blender, and also basic knowledge of Blender. Like I'm not gonna go through Blender Guru type of tutorials. Like he will teach you how to model and how to use modifiers. And after you're done with that, if you really want to take my course, if you know the basics, you can take on the first level for sure. If you want to go into the entirety of the workflows that I show, especially on the end part of the course, when I do cycles renders, when I do stuff with certain types of textures or modifiers, I think having a higher end PC is advisable.
Mhm.
Like if you have a 2090 on a laptop, I think it's still doable, but you just have to take it slower.
Mhm.
So yeah, just make sure that your PC can handle 3D, can handle renders, multiple renders, maybe even modeling while having viewport rendering activated. That's advisable for sure. And yeah, I wouldn't know about mentally, like willingness to learn.
No, true. And what would you like students to take away from the course after they've taken it?
Hmm. I guess that it's mostly about enjoying the process than wanting to end up with the image as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Like you like design is painful, but you really have to enjoy it on some level to be effective with it. So like it depends. Some people might even have different parts of the workflow. Which part of the workflow do they enjoy most? I would say the one that I enjoy the most is the beginning and the end. Everything else in the middle is the struggle. So if you want to embark on an adventure and really want to spend some time researching what you want to design before even starting, I guess you're gonna have fun. And I'm really insisting on try to spend as much time researching what you want to do before just going head in and designing a random antenna or some random sci-fi prop. Like try to think of something unique. Try to go after topics that interests you. Like if you're interested in butterflies and engines, just try to come up with something that connects them both. And then after you really have found something that you think it's original, just go through the technical part.
That's a great take as well, because before you even begin, like the project itself will kind of like huff up its own constraints based on what you do as you go along until it gets to the resolution that it naturally wants to get to. But if you can have those kind of like constraints beforehand, either through research or through your goal, that helps as well. And definitely reflects what game development is about. It's just, I guess, if you want to simplify and reduce it, it's just a set of constraints where you can work in them, very much like a game. Like, yes, you can have open sandboxes, but there's still an end limit to the sandbox, and then you can't go past it, and everything exists within. And one thing, obviously, in the course as well, like you can, but this is basically built about working for video games on a video game pipeline. And what I really enjoy as well is like you basically mimic and throw up some curveballs as well and challenges that come on on a live project of working on game development. What was it like trying to like come up with those scenarios that mimic that? Like, was it just stuff that you had experienced yourself, or did you kind of add a bit of extra spice, Dune pun intended, just to like make sure people experience what it could be like working on video games?
Yeah, I think it's just to simulate how the real environment is like, because whenever you go and do a tutorial, it's always set in the best of the possible worlds where nobody asks you for changes and everything is fine from the start. But to be honest, even if you do everything right, even if there's no mistakes or you misinterpreted the brief or anything like that, people just change their minds. Like maybe the client asked you to do something on a Tuesday morning and then on Wednesday night he just had a bad dream and changed his mind about how this thing should look. And you're just there to work for him in that particular moment. Like you're just trying to read his mind and trying to put into reality what he has in his mind. So in that case, you just need to follow along, try to convince him that certain ideas might not be the best ones. In some cases, I advocate for that too. But do that visually. Don't argue. Don't text with the client. Just show variations, show options, and that's what I'm trying to do with the course. Like, and it leaves you at the end of the day, at the end of the course, it leaves you with a lot of content, a lot of stuff to post on.
Definitely, yes.
On your portfolio. Like it's not the one image and that's it. Like it's really chunky amount of
Yes.
stuff you have produced.
Chunky is the perfect way to describe it. And that's a great way to explain it as well. Like, not only will you leave with a very healthy amount of work that you can present and showcase, which will definitely show a wide variety, not just only of like skill and flair and talent, but also problem solving and basically what's needed when you're working on a game or for an art director, maybe even beyond games as well. But also like the different kind of things that are involved along the way as well, like the technical, the work, the process, and you focus it all on an antenna. Why did you specifically choose that as a subject matter?
Yeah, just because I wanted to start out talking about references and where to get them from.
Yeah.
And I think one of the best, most effective ways that I found when it comes to creating a design from scratch is just trying to match together things that come from very different worlds. In that case, it's just, sci-fi mechanics and hard surface hardware stuff and the natural world. So how can you recreate something as organic as a plant or a flower or a dolphin, whatever? And how can you turn it into something man-made, but it still looks believable and interesting? And it's not like the cheesy sci-fi object with the 45 degrees cuts and, everything, what people think about when they think about sci-fi things. And it is an antenna just because I ended up choosing a tree as a main natural reference for my task. And trees, I kind of think of them as antennas in a way.
Of course.
They have a pole and they have branches.
Yeah.
And they're somehow connected to a larger network.
Yes.
And
just a little geek out on that. Sorry. Yeah. I'm just gonna say one small sentence. I could geek out about trees. I've done plenty of research on trees, and yes, the fact that it was rooted in a tree, I love it. Continue.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's almost like a mix between a tree and a mushroom because the shape kind of reminds me more of a mushroom. Mm-hmm. But also, I think that's also part of the design philosophy, like the way you interpret the references, like how much you're processing your ingredients. Just to go back to a cuisine metaphor, like if you just eat them raw, then you're basically just creating a sci-fi tree. Like you're converting the single leaves into dishes, and the branches might be cables or smaller arms and everything. It just looks like a tree, just a different material. But if you process them more and more, you end up with something that can remind you, maybe even just subconsciously, of a tree or a mushroom. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting just because it's based visually onto stuff that you're very familiar with, like mushrooms and trees, but still it takes it in a different way. So I would advocate for you processing your references a lot.
It's perfectly put. What's also clear as well is, and I mentioned it earlier as well, is, and I'm glad you did it in this way, and it might just be like a personal thing, like just that's the way you communicate, but you almost like let us go inside your brain. Like you audibly talk about your thought process, what's not working, what is working. And you mentioned like a loop, a cycle process as well. Like you almost revisit things that you already resolved beforehand back again, just to enhance it or to fix it. But in a way where it's almost like, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel like it's just, you're just trying like things out just to see if it works. There seems to be, you've identified a problem with it or something that can be resolved, and then you go ahead and resolve it. It just seems like targeted. It seems the right thing to do, as opposed to just pixel pushing and then see get something works that way. And I think that's going to be very, very useful for students to, whether they pick it up first time, especially ones that are starting out, or whether they get it later on, to almost have that continuing conversation as you go through, almost to the very, very end. Even with the different variations you do as well, like that's something that I geek out on. I love that as well. Do you do that in everything you do? Is that the way you work on almost everything?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
It was kind of difficult to even put my workflow into a course because it's really hard for me to do stuff in order. It's almost
I'm the
never.
same, by the way.
Yeah, right. You just start out modeling, and the last thing you do is material. Sometimes you just want to plug into that cool texture and see how it looks on a cylinder, and then go from there. And I really had to restrain myself not to do tweaks on my design even on the last lesson. It's because until you deliver it, until you press render, you can change anything you want.
Yeah.
It's just advisable to just not to do so, or to do changes but less and less.
Yeah.
Like you get sucked into this black hole at the end, which is the delivery.
Yeah.
But at the beginning of the timeline, you're full of possibilities.
So when do you, obviously deadline is an obvious one, but when you don't, obviously we're in the same boat in terms of it's not a straight line vector. It goes all over the place until we get to the very end. When do you know when to stop, or when do you know when to kind of like rein it back in and not get lost in that exploratory good stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to put into words because you just have to look at it and maybe even compare it to other finished work. If you're working on a project for which you have produced other concepts, or other people have produced other concepts, you can just compare it and see if it looks at the same level of quality. But if you're just doing a portfolio piece for yourself, you can compare it to the style that you maybe want to achieve. But if you're just by yourself in a room and you have no internet connection, I would say just take a nap, wake up and look at it again. And you're probably going to see a lot of stuff that you weren't noticing after working for a few hours on it.
Do you do that often? Like to take a break deliberately? Obviously, sometimes you can't because deadlines or just the nature of the project. But is that something that you try consciously to try and do? Like take a break or take some distance from a project?
Yeah, definitely. Like it becomes like when you're finishing an image or a design, it becomes almost irresistible to just want to render it and deliver it and put it on Dropbox or whatever and just forget about it. But I think like I really fight myself hard sometimes just to leave it there on Blender, maybe and just deliver it the next morning. Just look at it again, and that might actually backfire because I end up working a few hours more on it. But it's worth it because it's definitely going to be better than what I could have delivered on the day before.
And for people who are listening who are very, not particular, but like enjoy finding neat tips and tricks or different corners of, like, say, Blender, for example, that they've never discovered before, that you may have been looking for your whole life and then realize, like, oh, this is the thing that I was trying to solve in a long way around. You do cover a lot of setups, and like, for example, viewport and how you set up the viewport and customize it in a way. I always did that at the very end and didn't realize until watching the course, thinking I could have done that right at the beginning and saved myself a lot of time and just stuck with the exploration phase. So you cover a lot of what Blender itself, and also gone a bit further, taking away just Blender as like a specific product, but how to exploit 3D in particular to communicate your designs, whether it's taking a viewport screen grab, deploying certain settings on colors or whatever, just to get it to your. I mean, there's a few chapters where you basically just showcase in a way which doesn't seem technical of how to customize Blender how you want it to be for your needs. And do you tend to change that from project to project? Or was that just more a case of just showing students who are taking the course of like the different options that you can take to set your workflow?
I think I do it from task to task rather than project to project, because sometimes if you're working on environments, you might have a lot of objects in your scene, and in that case, I think the random view in Blender, where every object has a different, slightly different hue, is more useful than what I show in the course.
Yes.
But in that case, you're working on one single design, and silhouette is the most important thing. And setting up the viewport such in a way that you're basically doing black and white silhouettes on Photoshop, but you're 3D modeling. It's the best way to tackle it at the beginning, because you're just focusing on the silhouette. Yes. You're not tempted to go into the details or start modeling rivets. At that point, you're just forced to think about the silhouette.
Yes. That it's amazing, and it's the fact that it's like got that designer's process in mind. That's the reason why you do it. Like it just perfectly makes sense, and I can definitely see, especially like people that have already got not their workflow figured out, because it's always evolving, but are very comfortable in their process. in a weird way, like this could equally be just an add-on on top of your own. Like the course stuff could be an add-on just to your own workflow, because there's definitely things that I'm changing forever now the way you showcase, because it's definitely made the way I do certain things obsolete or clearly better, and even maybe want to go back and revisit projects that I've actually done and do them in a different way because it's unlocking things I wanted to explore in that first place. So I'm definitely excited to see what people do at different levels of how they take the course as well. Also, but one thing about Blender, which I personally find like it's a love hate thing, like the amount of add-ons that are available. It's just the whole life you could spend just trying to figure out which one works or not. And obviously, you've done a lot, taken a lot of that pain away from us because you've figured out most of it out yourself. Um, and there's some add-ons that I wasn't even aware of. That was exactly again what I was looking for. What made you decide on the add-ons that you showcased in the course? And again, like I've explained before, like you don't need these to take the course. It's just more like as a way to explain of how to, I guess, do that particular workflow. But what's your add-on journey been like?
Yeah. First of all, I'm super glad that you enjoyed the course. Like, really, really, thank you. And when it comes to add-ons, of course, I did not find them out all by myself. It's always like a conversation going on with colleagues, with other people that work on similar projects, and it's almost like a Pokemon
Yes.
catching experience where you might find a new one and you want to share it with everyone. And I mean, they're not like almost none of them are really necessary. You can do the thing that I do in this course just by using the base version of Blender. It's just going to take a bit more time and a bit more of setting up. But yeah, I guess once you identify which actions you tend to do the most, then add-ons come in your help and like save you time. For me, modeling add-ons I think are the most useful. Like hard ops, just being able to have to press one key Q and just have all those tiny menus in the center of the screen without having to open the side part of the viewport is just amazing. Like it changed my life to a point that I can't even think about how I used to work before having it. And yeah, I also talk about another one that is to optimize geometry. To optimize your scene, basically to give you a benchmark of how many polygons and how much the texture is.
I definitely need in my life.
Yeah, I also found out about it recently, but it's just amazing. And like without that, you can still work without that, but it's just useful to know, especially if you're supposed to hand files over to other people. They're not gonna kill you.
It's excellent because it's like for those looking to just optimize, there's definitely solutions provided. Again, and when you're working professionally, optimization is always going to be one of the top things on the list just to improve on, because it just either helps your process or the project's process and everything else as well. But then equally, like if you don't want to go down that kind of minefield of like which add-on to use, you can just forego it completely and you can still focus on the design and the core fundamentals as well. Like the add-ons don't make what you designed, they don't make the course. They are there to like supplement and showcase a way to improve or improve your pipeline as opposed to replacing it, so to speak. So yeah, that's very, very useful things that you showcase in that one. Another cool thing as well is the way you've got difficulty levels. You got 3 difficulty levels. I don't think we explained what they are. So if you wouldn't mind again recapping, unless we have, what they are and what they're meant for.
Yes. Level 1 is basically for students that are, I would say, beginners. They just learn a bit of art fundamentals and they learn how to use Blender. But they just want to step up their skills and learn all of that knowledge at once, like add-ons and design theory, and work on something from start to finish. And for them, I think the best way, it's not having to do the heavy lifting at first and having to come up with something that is completely different or unique. Just follow whatever I'm doing and like copy it almost to the 100%, maybe change a few things here and there. And then after you've done that, I'm sure you can work on something similar, either rewatch certain videos if you feel like, or just do the same thing by yourself. And in that case, you can probably come up with something original with your references, with your taste and things that you're interested in. And in that case, I think that having done the course following me priorly like that, it's going to be very, very helpful.
And another thing that's helpful as well is
Yeah.
the way you conclude the projects. And what I mean by that is like you can end it in 3 different ways to your project. You can do it obviously at 3 different pipelines, which I think is great because everyone has their own kind of way of doing things or need for doing things. Going back to cooking as an example, you might showcase finishing off like in a frying pan, but someone might want to put it in the oven, someone might want to eat it raw or whatever else. And I like how like you got the EV way, the cycles way, doing it, avoiding all those completely as if you want to as well. And they're all obviously, like you said, they're based on like what you've done on projects as well. So just to clarify, are all the ways that you showcase, are these all ways that you have used on projects live?
Yes, I would definitely say so. Especially Eevee versus Blender.
Yeah.
I think Eevee it was definitely the way I used to work when I was just going to overpaint over my renders. There's no point in having physically accurate shadows and light bounces if you're just gonna overpaint the whole thing using render passes.
Yeah.
So in that case, Eevee is lighter on your laptop. If you're using a lower end PC, you can definitely render something in Eevee without having a monster PC. And then Cycles is a bit more useful when you want to achieve a more mature, I would say, or refined, gritty look. Because in that case, if you have to go into painting and try to achieve the same amount of sharpness, it really takes a long time. And I think inadvertently I also created a bunch of different options for people having different specs, but it wasn't really meant to be like that. It was really more, I'm going to show you different ways of achieving the same result, but also find the one that is more in tune with the type of hardware you have.
Which I think is like so important to mention as well, because anything like the software that we use now and the render engines, they're just very hungry on spec. They want a lot of spec just to get more out of it. Doesn't mean you need it, but we all like a bit more extra GPU power and whatever else. But a cool way is like if you either don't have that, or maybe you on your work system, they don't have the same spec you do at home, you can scale it back but still get the results and get what you need to get. One amazing thing is the way you present the projects, to present the designs, obviously with the intention of giving it off to a client, but even to fellow artists and fellow designers, it just makes complete sense. So I love the way you just present stuff and communicate everything. Is that more of a you thing, or is that critical when you're working, obviously not just a concept artist in general, but specifically for video games?
It is specific to video games, but I think Oscar Cafaro again, my mentor, had a massive influence on me on that, because he really is more of a like hardcore designer when it comes to that. He's not gonna do animations to show you how things move, also because he's very heavy on sketching and painting, but he's just gonna point arrows, and the designs and the volumes are so well done that you can literally picture them moving in your head without needing to spend time animating them. And I think it's really crucial, because you're almost like creating IKEA instructions for the person going after you. You can have a cool image, a cool render, but if you clear that out, you're gonna save so much time to them, so much figuring out of, seeing if a shape can actually intersect and retract into a core, or if an arm can fold. All those different things, if you check them, if they work, that's basically how to be a good and effective concept artist, rather than just creating a picture that has the quality of a matte painting, but it hasn't solved anything.
Yes. I also enjoy how, again, like you think out loud in the course, you explain your thought process, but also you almost like think about the world that you're in whilst you're designing it. Like there's a specific point you mentioned where you're working on something, one part of the design, but you're saying you're probably not going to see this, but then you find a scenario where maybe you could.
Hmm.
Is that more of a nature of like working in games where like what is initially set as the brief because it's always changing? Like, do you find that there's always like a need for something that initially wasn't there? And is that why you kind of think in those terms?
Mm, I think it has more to do with designing in general.
Right.
Like it's really difficult to like in retrospect after you're done on a task, you might look at your design and think, I could have just spent time designing the top part, the middle part, and the ground part
Yeah.
without wandering off in this random direction trying to figure out the core, even though I'm not showing it. But yeah, I mean, if you think about designing like discovering a landscape, like you need to uncover it from the shadows and then decide what to pick and use. And I think just if you allow yourself to work on pointless, so to say, parts of the design and then mash them together in a way that makes sense, it's more compelling and you end up with a more believable design, because of course everything has a core. There's always something going on underneath panels. Everything has internals, and it's just providing more quality, I think.
And you also mentioned the course as well, like the detail, and by detail, not just mean like general visual detail, but like the thought gone into literally every single nook and cranny of the antenna and where it sits and how it's interacted with. You go into there and you go down from silhouette all the way down to how the user interface potentially could be, and offer suggestions in that way as well. And I love how like when you explore those angles and those avenues, it is more a case of like you openly say like this is more like, okay, it could be this. I'm going to show off how to do this. And one of the reasons why you say it is, and you mentioned in the fact of the course as well, like because now concept artists in particular with the workflow that we use and what we can do, you are able to almost keep your footprint or your fingerprint or your signature almost into the game and stay there. Do you go to those lengths for that reason?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, at the same time, if you're helping a 3D artist that much, you're almost like it's a bit bad to say, but he's the person working on the 3D of your concept. All he needs to do in an ideal scenario is just optimize the design you send over. And of course, some 3D artists might think of it as a bummer because maybe they wanted to give like an extra touch to a painted or a sketched concepts.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this case, providing so much information, solving all the shapes, solving all the mechanisms is really allowing you to skip most of the process and enter the engine. Sometimes even in Dune, we test designs. We just put them into Unreal and see how they look with the setup lighting system that we have. And that is something that simply wasn't possible to do until a few years ago.
Yeah.
Or it was, but you needed to be technical about it.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, it's more responsibility on our side. It's more work, but it's for sure more compelling, and it involves us more.
Now, by your personal work, your work overall is incredible. Technically, it looks great. So obviously, like from an artist point of view, you can see it looks great. A lot of things look great these days. I'm not putting shade on your work, but I'm just saying like it looks great. However, once you get past the first initial, that looks awesome, it's got my attention. Then you look at like what's been created or what's trying to be communicated, and you see the artist's thought process behind it, or what they're trying to achieve, or what they're trying to provoke. Even your designs are cool, and there's definitely like a level of intended like uniqueness to them, like almost trying to prove a point, saying this is what could be explored. Is that a good take to make, or is that just me, like figure something out? Like, why do you design the way you design? Like, for example, I'm thinking more like the things like the dolphin, the manta ray, and then all the other stuff you've got as well. Like, there's definitely an extra layer that you put into it that it just goes beyond, hey, this is a design, enjoy this. Like, it seems like you're trying to make a commentary on design. Is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you, by the way. I think, yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of doing what you like and not learning a technique and just do what everybody else does to enjoy yourself, or doing fun arts. I think you can end up doing fun arts even of projects that don't exist just by replicating somebody's workflow and you know, just wanting to be that person professionally. And I mean, there's nothing wrong if you want to do that, if that's what gives you happiness while working. I don't know.
Yeah.
In my case, it's more like being interested in random topics and finding a way to express them somehow, or just having random connections between ideas and trying to solve them visually. So if I do have a collection of references that I save on my phone and on my PC. Like, it's just pictures that I encounter while scrolling or just going through boards and stuff. And I really try to do a very careful selection of what I put in those folders. And I have, like, over time, I wish I could have the time to do a design based on each one of those images. And it's just the same way as I was talking before when it comes to processing your ingredients. I don't want to do something that looks exactly like that, but in a different shape. Like, if there's a sick-ass keyboard, I want to do the car version of that keyboard. That would be like a fun design exercise, but I want to put them there in the folder, like, you know, have them there rot for a while, and then after they broke down to the single molecules, even in my mind, maybe they become useful when it comes to creating something completely different. And yeah, it's just, I guess that the advice that could come out of this is just do whatever interests you. Like, you don't think that if the thing that you're interested to doesn't interest anyone else, then it's not worth pursuing.
Yes.
Like, if you have interest in very weird subjects, just go ahead and follow them. That's like a signal. That's like your brain telling you this is where you're going to perform better, where you're going to come up with the most original stuff.
Well said. Daniele, it's time to wrap up. Everyone listening, the course is available now. Hit the links, grab content out for video games. It's a packed course. It's a course that's going to stay with you and your workflow for a long time. Even if your workflow changes in the future, there's a lot of fundamental things in this that will definitely stick with you for sure. Any final words from yourself before we end?
Yeah, let me know if you end up buying it, and if you have any questions, just hit me up on ArtStation or Instagram. Like, I'm really happy to answer and help you out.
Awesome. Daniele, it's been amazing. Thanks so much.
Super excited to see what students do with Daniele's course. And a big thanks to him for jumping on. Concept art for video games is available now. Hit the links below to sign up and give Daniele a follow too. I've been your host, Ravindanda. Till next time.